Emily's hand trembled over the pregnancy test resting on the bathroom counter. 2 lines she wasn't prepared to count staring back at her. Downstairs, Ji-hoon was arguing with his grandmother about how many spoonfuls of sugar belonged in his tea, utterly unaware that his entire world was about to expand in ways no one in the house could yet imagine. Emily pressed a hand to her stomach, disbelief and joy tangling too tightly to separate. "Taemin," she called, voice unsteady. "Can you come upstairs?" Downstairs, Taemin set down his newspaper immediately, something in his wife's tone pulling him toward the staircase 2 steps at a time. Welcome to Black Silk Stories, the home of Afro-Korean stories that hit different. Subscribe, drop a comment, and do not go anywhere. This is only the beginning. 2 years of marriage had settled into Emily and Taemin like something neither of them had realized they were missing until they finally had it. Mornings that began with quiet coffee on the terrace, evenings folded around Ji-hoon's homework and Sunhee's watchful presence, a rhythm built from patience instead of urgency. Jake's innovations had expanded further than Emily ever anticipated. Now operating across 3 continents with Michael running daily operations from Los Angeles, while Emily oversaw strategy from Seoul, flying out only when a deal demanded her physical presence rather than her voice on a call. But nothing in either of their carefully built lives had prepared Emily for the small stick trembling in her hand that morning. Taemin appeared in the bathroom doorway, still in his robe, hair uncharacteristically tousled from sleep. "Emily? What's wrong?" Emily turned to him, tears already gathering, torn between disbelief and something far brighter. "Nothing's wrong," she said. "Everything might actually be right." She held up the test. Taemin's eyes moved from the stick to her face and back again, comprehension dawning slowly, then all at once. "I'm pregnant," Emily said, laughing through tears. "Taemin, I'm pregnant." For a moment, he said nothing at all, simply crossing the small distance between them and pulling her into an embrace so tight it nearly lifted her off her feet. "We're having a baby," he whispered against her hair, voice thick with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to show even now, 2 years into a marriage that had taught him it was safe to. "We should tell Ji-hoon," Emily said, pulling back to look at him. "He deserves to be part of this from the very beginning." They gathered the family in the sitting room that evening, he settling into her favorite chair with the quiet expectation of someone who suspected exactly what was coming, and Ji-hoon dropping onto the couch beside his parents, 11 years old now, taller, more composed, though the same searching curiosity from childhood still lived behind his eyes. "You both look like you're about to tell me something important," Ji-hoon said, glancing between them. "We are," Emily said, taking Taemin's hand. "You're going to be a big brother." Ji-hoon's mouth fell open. "Wait. Seriously? You're having a baby?" "We are," Taemin confirmed, unable to hide the smile pulling at his composed features. Ji-hoon leapt off the couch, fists in the air exactly as he had at the airport 4 years earlier. "Finally! I've been asking for a sibling since I was 8. Sunhee, watching from her chair in an elegant charcoal gray silk blouse and tailored trousers, allowed herself a rare, unguarded laugh. "Patience was never one of your strengths, Ji-hoon." "I don't need patience anymore," Ji-hoon said, grinning. "I have a sibling coming." The first ultrasound appointment arrived 3 weeks later, Emily dressed simply but elegantly in a soft dove gray wrap dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, Taemin beside her in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, no tie, sleeves rolled with an ease that had become natural to him over the years. The technician moved the wand slowly across Emily's abdomen, the screen flickering with grainy shapes neither of them could yet interpret. "Congratulations," the technician said, smiling. "Everything looks healthy. Would you like to know how many babies we're seeing today?" Emily's brow furrowed. "How many? Just the one, right?" The technician's smile widened. "Actually, no. I'm seeing 3 distinct heartbeats." Silence fell over the small room. "3. Taemin repeated, voice barely above a whisper. "Triplets," the technician confirmed. 2 appear to be developing in separate sacs, and the third alongside them. "All 3 heartbeats are strong." Emily's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling freely, disbelief and joy crashing together all at once. 3 babies. "Taemin, we're having 3 babies." Taemin sat frozen for a long moment, staring at the screen, at the 3 small flickering shapes that would soon become the rest of their lives, before something in his composed exterior finally broke loose entirely. 3, he repeated, laughing now, disbelief melting into pure wonder. "How did we manage 3? "I have no idea," Emily said, laughing through her tears. But I already love them. They told Sunhee and Jihoon together that evening. Gathered once more in the sitting room, Emily still glowing from the appointment, Taemin unable to stop the smile that kept breaking across his face throughout dinner. There's more to the news than just one baby, Emily said carefully, watching both their faces. Jihoon straightened immediately. More? What do you mean more? We're having triplets, Taemin said. 2 boys and a girl, the doctor believes, though we won't know the genders for certain until later scans. Jihoon's jaw dropped entirely. 3? At once? I'm going to have 3 siblings instead of 1. All at the same time, Emily confirmed, laughing at the pure shock on her son's face. Sunhee set down her teacup with unusual care, studying the news with the calculating precision she brought to everything, though warmth crept steadily into her expression as the reality settled. 3 grandchildren, she said softly, almost to herself. This family will not know a quiet moment again. Is that a bad thing? Jihoon asked, half teasing, half genuinely curious. Sunhee looked at her grandson, then at her son and daughter-in-law, radiant despite the exhaustion already gathering beneath Emily's eyes, and felt something settle deep in her chest that she hadn't expected to feel again at her age. No, she said. It is the very opposite of a bad thing. It is everything I once feared this family would never have. Jihoon crossed the room and wrapped his arms around his mother, careful and gentle in a way that surprised even him. I'm going to be the best big brother in the world, he said fiercely. I already know exactly how it feels to be given a family you didn't expect. I'm going to make sure they know how lucky they are, every single day. Emily held her son close, tears slipping freely now, overwhelmed by a joy she hadn't dared to imagine even in her most hopeful moments. They already are lucky, she whispered. Because they have you. The final months of Emily's pregnancy tested every ounce of composure she built across a decade of boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. By the 7th month, her frame had grown considerably, 3 lives demanding more of her body than she'd ever anticipated, and she'd finally, reluctantly, handed full operational control of Jake's innovations to Michael for the remainder of the pregnancy. You built an empire, Michael reminded her gently over their weekly video call, Emily propped against a mountain of pillows. Let someone else carry it for a few months. You've got 3 entire humans to carry instead. I hate how right you are, Emily said, laughing despite her exhaustion. Taemin had taken to working from home more frequently as her due date approached, trading his usual tailored suits for softer, more casual clothing around the house, pressed linen shirts in muted tones, sleeves rolled, a quiet ease settling into him that Emily had never seen during his years running the family's various enterprises. You don't have to hover, Emily told him one evening, smiling as he adjusted the pillows behind her back for the 3rd time in an hour. I do actually, Taemin said. I intend to hover until all 3 of them arrive safely, and likely for a considerable while after. Jihoon, now firmly 11 and endlessly curious, had taken to reading everything he could find about triplet pregnancies, arriving at dinner most nights with facts neither parent had asked for. Did you know triplets are more likely to arrive early? He announced one evening, spearing a piece of vegetable with unusual seriousness. The books say we should have the hospital bag ready by 32 weeks, not 34. Duly noted, Emily said, exchanging an amused glance with Taemin. I've also been researching names, Jihoon continued. I have a list. A very good list. We'll take it under consideration, Taemin said, hiding a smile behind his water glass. The call came at 2 in the morning, 4 weeks earlier than expected. Exactly as Jihoon's research had warned, Emily woke Taemin with a sharp intake of breath, her hand pressed against her lower back. Taemin. It's happening. He was fully alert within seconds, years of instinct honed from a very different kind of crisis now serving an entirely different purpose. The bag is by the door. I'll get the car. Sunhee, alerted by the commotion, appeared in the hallway already dressed, calm and composed despite the hour, a deep burgundy silk robe wrapped elegantly around her. Go, she told them both, already moving toward Jihoon's room. I'll wake him and bring him to the hospital myself. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of contractions and Taemin's white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, his usual unshakable composure fraying at the edges for the first time in years. Talk to me, Emily said through gritted teeth. Say something. Anything. I love you, Taemin said immediately. I have never been more terrified in my life, and I have negotiated with men who carried weapons into meetings. Despite everything, Emily laughed, the sound breaking into a groan as another contraction rolled through her. Labor stretched nearly 14 hours, longer and more difficult than either of them anticipated given the early arrival. The medical team moving with careful urgency around Emily as the delivery room filled with quiet, controlled tension. Taemin stayed beside her through every moment. His hand locked in hers, murmuring encouragement in a mixture of English and Korean. He didn't seem to notice himself switching between. "You are the strongest woman I have ever known," he told her. Forehead pressed to hers between contractions. 3 more minutes. You can do 3 more minutes. Sun-hee and Ji-hoon waited in the corridor outside. Ji-hoon pacing in small, anxious circles, dressed hastily in a simple gray hoodie and joggers pulled on in the panic of being woken at 2 in the morning. "They'll be okay, right?" Ji-hoon asked for perhaps the 10th time. "All 4 of them? Mom and the babies?" "Your mother," Sun-hee said, taking her grandson's hand to still his pacing, "survived losing you and finding you again across an entire ocean. She will survive this as well. Have faith in her strength, Ji-hoon." "I certainly do." Finally, just after 4 in the afternoon, a nurse emerged with a tired but radiant smile. "Congratulations," she said. 3 healthy babies. 2 boys, 1 girl, exactly as predicted. Mother and babies are all doing wonderfully. Ji-hoon let out a whoop of relief so loud it echoed down the corridor, and even Sun-hee's careful composure cracked into open, unguarded joy. Inside the recovery room, Emily lay propped against pillows, exhausted beyond anything she'd known. 3 small bundles arranged carefully around her. Taemin seated at her side, still in the same rumpled shirt he'd thrown on hours earlier, staring at his children with an expression Emily had never seen on him before. Complete, unguarded wonder. "They're perfect," he whispered. "They really are," Emily agreed, voice hoarse but glowing. Ji-hoon entered slowly, almost reverently, Sun-hee just behind him, both drawn immediately to the small bundles. "Can I hold one?" Ji-hoon asked, voice quieter than Emily had heard in years. "Of course," Emily said. "Sit down first." Ji-hoon settled carefully into the chair beside the bed, and Taemin placed the smallest of the 3 boys into his arms with careful precision, guiding his son's hold with practiced gentleness. Ji-hoon stared down at the tiny face, overwhelmed. "He's so small," he whispered. "I didn't know anything could be this small." "You were this small once too," Emily said softly. "I don't remember that," Ji-hoon said, still transfixed. "No," Emily agreed, smiling. "But I do." They spent that evening deciding names, the small hospital room filled with quiet deliberation and Ji-hoon's insistent opinions from his carefully researched list. "I still think Woojin is a strong name for him," Ji-hoon said, nodding toward the son currently asleep in his arms. "Woojin," Taemin repeated, testing the sound. "I like it. It suits him." "And for the other boy?" Emily asked, gently rocking the second son against her chest. "Daniel," Sun-hee offered unexpectedly, surprising them all. "A strong name in your heritage, Emily. Paired well beside his brother's Korean name. Both boys carrying both halves of where they come from." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel. I love that. And our girl?" Taemin asked, looking toward the smallest bundle sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside the bed. Emily considered for a long moment, thinking of every year that had led to this one, every loss that had somehow led to this exact overflowing joy. "Grace," she finally said, "because that's exactly what all of this feels like. Grace, undeserved and completely overwhelming." Taemin leaned down and kissed his wife's forehead gently. "Woojin, Daniel and Grace," he said softly. "Welcome to this family. You have no idea yet how loved you already are." The first 6 months with the triplets unfolded like a beautiful kind of chaos neither Emily nor Taemin had fully prepared for, despite every book Ji-hoon had insisted on buying them. Their home, once quiet and orderly, now hummed constantly with the sounds of 3 infants who rarely slept on the same schedule, a rotation of bottles and diaper changes and soft lullabies sung in 2 languages depending on who was holding which child. Emily had returned to overseeing Jake's innovations part-time by the 4th month, though her version of part-time still involved video calls conducted while bouncing Grace gently against her shoulder, dressed in a soft ivory cashmere sweater and tailored joggers, her boardroom polish traded temporarily for comfort that still somehow carried its own elegance. "You're the only executive I know who can close a 9-figure deal while burping a baby," Michael said over their weekly call, grinning at the screen. "Multitasking was always my specialty," Emily said, laughing as Grace let out a small, satisfied hiccup against her shoulder. Speaking of which, how's the Singapore expansion looking? Better than projected, Michael said. The regional team wants you there in person for the ribbon cutting next month. If you're up for travel with 3 babies in tow. Emily glanced toward the nursery, where Taemin was currently attempting, with limited success, to get Woo Jin and Daniel to nap at the same time. Let me discuss it with my husband, she said. Though I suspect the real challenge won't be Singapore. It'll be the flight. That evening, over a dinner Taemin had somehow managed to cook one-handed while holding Daniel. Emily raised the question of travel. Jake's Innovations wants me in Singapore next month, she said, for the new regional office launch. I know it's a lot to ask with the triplets still so small. Taemin considered this while gently rocking Daniel, who'd finally, mercifully, drifted off. We'll manage it, he said simply. You built that company from nothing, Emily. I'm not going to be the reason you step back from something you're proud of. It won't just be me traveling, Emily said carefully. I was hoping we could make it a family trip. All of us. Maybe extend it into a short vacation once the launch is finished. Ji-hoon, seated across the table finishing his homework, looked up immediately. Wait, are we actually going somewhere? As a family? With the babies? If your father agrees, Emily said. Taemin glanced between his wife's hopeful expression and his son's barely contained excitement, something warm settling behind his composed features. I think, he said, it's time this family learned how to travel together properly, chaos and all. The Singapore trip, when it finally arrived, proved far more manageable than any of them anticipated, largely thanks to Sun Hee's insistence on accompanying them. I did not raise a son capable of running half this country's shadow economy, Sun, he said dryly, settling into the private jet's cabin in an elegant ink blue traveling ensemble, only to watch him struggle changing a diaper mid-flight. I am coming, and that is final. The ribbon-cutting ceremony itself passed in a blur of camera flashes and careful diplomacy. Emily dressed in a sharply tailored cream pantsuit, hair swept into a sleek low ponytail, radiating the same quiet authority that had built her empire in the first place, even with motherhood reshaping every other corner of her life. Ms. Jakes, a local reporter asked during the press circle afterward, how do you balance running an international company across 3 continents while raising 4 children? Emily smiled, glancing toward where Taemin stood at the edge of the room holding Grace against his shoulder, Ji-hoon beside him entertaining Woo Jin with an exaggerated funny face that had the baby giggling uncontrollably. Badly some days, Emily admitted, drawing warm laughter from the gathered press. But I've learned that the right partner, and the right family, makes even the impossible days feel manageable. I didn't build this company alone, and I certainly don't parent alone either. After the launch concluded, they extended the trip by 4 days, settling into a private villa overlooking Sentosa's coastline, the ocean stretching turquoise and endless beyond wide balcony windows. Ji-hoon, now thoroughly enjoying his role as eldest sibling, had taken to narrating everything to the triplets as though they could understand every word. This is the ocean, he told Woo Jin solemnly, holding him carefully on the balcony as the baby stared, wide-eyed, at the waves below. One day I'll teach you to swim in it. And you too, he added, glancing toward where Daniel dozed against Taemin's chest nearby. And Grace, when you're older, I'll teach you not to be afraid of the waves, even when they look scary. You've become quite the philosopher, Taemin observed, amused, watching his eldest son from a nearby lounge chair. I just want them to know things I wish someone had told me sooner, Ji-hoon said, more thoughtfully than his 11 years usually allowed. Like how scary things aren't always bad. Like how family can show up in ways you don't expect, and that's not something to be afraid of. Taemin studied his son for a long moment, struck, as he often was, by how much wisdom the boy had carried since the very beginning of all of this. Your mother would be proud to hear you say that, he said. I learned it from both of you, Ji-hoon said simply, turning back to narrate the horizon to a baby who understood none of it and yet seemed perfectly content listening anyway. Emily, watching from the doorway with Grace now stirring gently in her arms, felt something settle deep and permanent in her chest. A certainty that whatever chaos and challenge still lay ahead, this family, built from loss and stitched together through patience, had become something entirely unbreakable. 2 years slipped by in the particular blur that only small children could create. First steps, first words spoken in a charming tangle of English and Korean, first sibling squabbles resolved by an increasingly patient Ji-hoon, who had, true to his promise, become the kind of older brother who took his role seriously without ever losing his sense of humor about it. By the time the triplets turned 2, Emily had expanded Jake's innovations into 2 additional markets, and Taemin had quietly restructured much of the family's traditional holdings into fully legitimate ventures. A transformation, son. He watched with an approval she rarely voiced aloud but demonstrated in the ease that had settled permanently into her posture. We should take a real vacation, Emily said one evening, scrolling through her tablet at the kitchen island, while Taemin supervised a chaotic dinner of toddlers determined to feed themselves. Not a business trip disguised as one, an actual, uninterrupted family vacation. Define uninterrupted, Taemin said, wiping mashed sweet potato from Daniel's cheek with practiced efficiency. No press circles. No ribbon cuttings. Just us, Emily said. I was thinking the Amalfi Coast. Jihoon's been wanting to see Italy since he started that geography unit at school. Jihoon, currently helping Grace with her spoon from across the table, looked up immediately. Wait, seriously? Italy? Seriously, Emily said, smiling. Then yes, Jihoon said. 1,000 times yes. They arrived in Positano 2 weeks later, the coastal town spilling down toward the Mediterranean in cascades of pastel-colored buildings, the July sun warm and golden across the water. Emily stood on the terrace of their rented villa that first morning, dressed in a flowing white linen dress that caught the sea breeze, her hair loose and natural around her shoulders, coffee in hand as she watched Taemin chase a giggling Daniel across the terrace, both of them barefoot, Taemin's usually immaculate composure entirely abandoned in favor of pure, unguarded play. You look happy, son, he observed, joining Emily at the railing in an elegant coral caftan, sun hat shading her eyes. I am happy, Emily said. I don't think I've ever said that as easily as I do now. It suits you, son, he said. This life. This family. I confess I did not always believe it would look like this. Neither did I, Emily admitted. But I'm grateful every day that it does. The days that followed unfolded in a warm, unhurried rhythm. Mornings spent on the private beach below the villa, Jihoon teaching Woojin how to build increasingly elaborate sandcastles while Grace toddled along the shoreline in a small ruffled swimsuit, shrieking with delight every time the waves rushed toward her feet. Careful, Taemin called, jogging down to scoop Grace up just as a larger wave approached, spinning her in the air until her shrieks turned to delighted laughter. Emily watched from a lounge chair, dressed in a simple sage sundress, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, sketching the scene into memory the way she'd learned to do since motherhood had taught her how quickly these small, perfect moments passed. Evenings were spent on the terrace, the whole family gathered around a long wooden table for dinners that stretched late into the warm Mediterranean night, Jihoon recounting increasingly exaggerated stories from his day to make his younger siblings laugh, Sunhee correcting his Korean grammar between bites with the patient persistence of a woman determined that all 4 grandchildren would carry both halves of their heritage fluently. Tell them the story about the 7-star hotel, Jihoon said one evening, grinning at his parents across the candlelit table. The one where you asked a stranger if you could sit with her. You mean the story where you asked me? Emily corrected, laughing. Same story, Jihoon said. Best story in our whole family if you ask me. Taemin reached for Emily's hand across the table, threading their fingers together, something soft and permanent moving across his face as their toddlers babbled contentedly nearby. It might be the best decision either of us ever made, Taemin said. Though I suspect it was really our son's decision, made entirely on his own. I have good instincts, Jihoon said proudly, spearing a piece of pasta. Always have. On their final evening in Positano, the whole family gathered on the beach to watch the sunset, the sky bleeding orange and pink across the water as Woojin and Daniel chased each other along the shore, shrieking with laughter. Grace perched happily on Taemin's shoulders, small hands buried in his hair. Jihoon stood beside Emily, both watching the scene in comfortable silence, the ocean breeze warm against their skin. Do you ever think about how different everything could have gone? Jihoon asked quietly. If I hadn't walked up to your table that day? Emily considered the question carefully, watching her husband spin their daughter gently against the darkening sky, their 2 sons collapsing into the sand in fits of laughter nearby. All the time, she admitted. But I think some part of both of us already knew even then. You didn't create this family, Jihoon. You just had the courage to see it before the rest of us caught up. Jihoon smiled, leaning his head briefly against her shoulder. 13 years old now in every way that mattered even if the number hadn't quite caught up yet. Best decision I ever made, he said again, softly this time, watching the sun finally disappear beneath the horizon, The whole family gathered together exactly where they belonged. Epilogue. Every season that followed. Age 5. The triplets started kindergarten on the same crisp autumn morning. 3 small backpacks lined up by the door. Woojin's covered in dinosaurs, Daniel's in planets, Grace's in a constellation of stars she'd insisted on herself. "I don't want to go," Grace announced, arms crossed in a stance so identical to her eldest brother's childhood stubbornness that Emily and Taemin exchanged a knowing, amused glance across the kitchen. "You'll love it," Ji-hoon said, crouching to her level 16 now, tall and steady in a way that made Emily's chest ache with quiet pride every time she looked at him. "I promise. And if anyone's mean to you, you tell me. I'll handle it." "Like a bodyguard?" Grace asked, brightening instantly. "Exactly like a bodyguard," Ji-hoon said, straightening her backpack strap. "The best one you'll ever have." Sun-hee, now silver-haired and slower in her steps but no less sharp in her presence, watched from the doorway in a deep plum silk cardigan, Kane resting lightly at her side. "This family has never once been quiet," she said, though warmth softened every word. "I wouldn't trade the noise for anything." Age 8. Woojin discovered Taekwondo the same year Daniel discovered painting. And Grace discovered she had strong opinions about both. "You should paint what I do at Taekwondo," Woojin told Daniel one afternoon, sprawled across the living room floor in his small white uniform, belt still crisp and yellow. "It would look cool." "I paint what I want to paint," Daniel said, unbothered, dabbing careful strokes of blue across a canvas propped against the coffee table. Grace, meanwhile, had declared herself the family's official commentator, narrating both activities with dramatic flair from atop the couch. "And in this corner," she announced, "we have the future Taekwondo champion of the entire world, versus his brother, the future famous painter," while their sister watches and judges everyone equally. Emily, watching from the kitchen doorway with a cup of tea, laughed so hard she nearly spilled it. "They get their flair from you," Taemin said, appearing beside her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "They get their stubbornness from you," Emily countered, grinning. Age 12. By the time the triplets turned 12, Ji-hoon had left for university in Seoul, though he returned most weekends, unable to fully separate himself from the chaos he'd helped build. "You're only 40 minutes away," Emily reminded him during one visit, watching him wrestle both boys into submission over a video game controller dispute, while Grace filmed the entire thing on her phone for what she called evidence. "40 minutes feels like forever when I'm used to hearing this noise every single day," Ji-hoon said, laughing as Daniel finally wrestled the controller free. Jake's innovations had by then become one of the most recognized names across 3 continents, Emily's face regularly gracing business publications alongside headlines about resilience and reinvention, though she'd learned over the years to leave the empire at the office door each evening. Taemin, meanwhile, had transformed the family's legacy so thoroughly that the Kong name had become synonymous with legitimate industry rather than the fear it once commanded, a transformation son. He often remarked she never thought she'd live to see, let alone be proud of. Age 16. The triplets' 16th birthday brought the entire family together in the same garden beneath the same maple tree that had witnessed nearly every pivotal chapter of their story. Now grown taller, its branches wider, string lights woven through them exactly as they had been at Emily and Taemin's wedding years before. Ji-hoon, adult now, composed and steady in a tailored charcoal suit that echoed, without either of them fully realizing it, the very outfit he'd worn as a small boy who'd once walked away from his bodyguards toward a stranger's table, raised his glass toward his 3 younger siblings. "So many years ago, I asked a woman I didn't know if I could sit with her," he said, voice carrying easily across the gathered family and friends. "I had no idea that decision would eventually give me 3 siblings, a mother I'd been missing my whole life, and a family loud enough to fill every quiet room I used to sit in alone." He looked toward Woojin, Daniel and Grace, 16 now, radiant and distinct in their own becoming selves. "Happy birthday to the 3 best decisions I never had to make myself. You were always going to be part of this family. I just got here a little earlier than you did." Emily, standing beside Taemin with tears gathering freely, felt her husband's hand find hers, their fingers threading together the same way they had on countless evenings across countless years. "Every hard year led exactly here," she whispered, echoing words she'd once spoken on her wedding day. "Every single one," Taemin agreed, watching their children, all 4 of them so different, so entirely theirs, laughing together beneath the golden, string-lit branches of a tree that had quietly witnessed the entire shape of their families becoming. Sun-hee, seated nearby in a place of honor, silver hair catching the garden lights, watched her family with the contentment she'd spent decades believing she'd never earn the right to feel. This, she said softly to no one in particular, was always worth the wait. This is where their story finds its true lasting rest. Not with an ending, but with a family that never stopped growing into exactly who they were meant to become. Thank you for walking through every chapter of this journey with us. Welcome, always, to Black Silk Stories, the home of Afro-Korean stories that hit different. Subscribe, drop a comment telling us which chapter of this family's story stayed with you the longest, and stay close. This may be the end of their story, but it is only the beginning of the next one waiting for you here.